Podcast.
And McAllister down the left field line. Connor Tate is going to round third. He will score. And rounding third is Blaylock. He will score. And the Dogs walk it off.
If you're looking for the latest Georgia Bulldog news in football, basketball, baseball, and recruiting, then you are in the right place.
It's third down, Bryce Young's career. You need 10, play clock at 4. From the pocket, launching downfield, underthrown and intercepted. Keely Ringo has an escort down the sidelines. All the way to the end zone, and Georgia is going to conquer the Crimson Tide.
Hosted by Jeremiah Stoddard and Jonathan Williams.
Georgia on the mountaintop. Demons be gone, and the drought is over. National champions at long last.
Just sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for these hot takes you're about to listen to.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? It is the Classic City Sports Podcast. Jonathan Williams this time coming at you with the intro, along with my guy, Jeremiah Stoddard, a.k.a. the Stoddard Father. Tons of stuff to talk about. Big win for Georgia against Auburn this past weekend. Kind of maybe got them back on the right track into the direction, built up some momentum before they head into Vandy, and then ultimately into the bye week where really the gauntlet of their schedule starts is after the bye week. They've got some loaded matchups now that maybe we didn't see coming earlier in the season, but now some of those matchups are looking a little bit tougher than what we may have expected. After that, we're going to go ahead and dive into the Vanderbilt game, kind of talk what we can about Vanderbilt, give you our best breakdown of them, what we see happening potentially. And then also we're just going to kind of recap. It's the halfway point, believe it or not. College football regular season is already halfway over. It come and gone just like that. So now we got half of it left. And then, of course, SEC championship and playoffs, all that good stuff. And then after that, we got Classic City Pick'ems. And then after that, to close it out, the nightcap of the evening, it is going to be King of the Hill. And this time we're going to be talking about who we think the most overhyped team in college football is right now. So, like I said, a lot of stuff that we're going to cover. Always got a lot of stuff coming at you guys, but we're going to start it off. Usually you're the one asking me this question to start off, Starter, but I get to ask you this time. What were your initial thoughts watching Auburn? Don't give us the in-depth breakdown or anything like that. Just give us what were your initial thoughts, quarter by quarter and after the game.
So first thing was early in the game, you kind of felt like it was a little bit of a slower start to get kind of moving. You and I were talking before the show, and Georgia punted 5 times, which seems like a lot, and it was still a lot of punts throughout the game. But when you really look at it, it's 4 in the first half. And then you get that 14 points in the first half. So it was a little bit slow starting, but in the second half, you cruised, you punted 1 time in the second half. You didn't kick any field goals in the second half. You only kicked 1 field goal in the entire game, happened to miss it. So that was our keys the last week. We talked about it. That's what I brought up. I said, don't turn the ball over and don't kick a lot of field goals when you're in the red zone. And they only kicked 1 total field goal, and they weren't even in the red zone when they did it, which is the good part. And then they only turned the ball over 1 time on that Stetson Bennett fumble, which that was what you wanted to see. You got to see them come out there and really play a cleaner game of football.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people were looking at Stetson Bennett saying that he was having a little bit of a rough game. He only had, I think, 25 passing yards in the first half.
Yeah, 26 on like 8 or 10 completions.
Yeah, I don't even know if he had 10 completions. I think it was like 10 attempts almost. It was like something small on that number. But he still had 183 passing yards in the second half.
Yeah.
And that, if he had 183 passing yards in the first half, everyone would be like, dang, that's a really good half. But because it came in the second half after the first half he had, it kind of gets overshadowed. So he came out there. My biggest takeaway is that running game. Yeah. It was a thing of beauty to see Georgia get back into running the ball like that. They almost had 300 yards of rushing in that game.
Yeah, talking about Stetson, the old cliche, it's not always about how you start. Sometimes it's about how you finish. So in that instance, he finished off strong. I know he missed those 2 deep balls with Brock Bowers and Lyle McConkey, which is not typical or characteristic of a guy that led the nation on completion percentage on throws 20-plus yards or more just a season ago. So that's not like Stetson. And then there are also some reports saying that maybe he had a dinged-up shoulder. Maybe that was playing into it. I don't know. Yeah. Not really sure if that was true or how much.
Seth Emerson was saying that, like, before the game, they were really working on his shoulder and his bicep, I think, of his throwing arm.
He took some big hits against Missouri, so that could potentially be an issue. But Doesn't sound like it's going to be a lingering issue. It sounds like he's still going to be playing against Vanderbilt. But also, talking about, you highlighted the run game.
Yes.
And for me, it wasn't necessarily the run game that was impressive. No, don't get me wrong. You rushed for almost 300 yards. Yeah, that's freaking impressive. It was the fact that Georgia was able to adapt in the middle of a game and get something going, because early on they were relying on early downs. It was screen game, your typical Georgia offense of what it's been this season. Get the ball out of your hands quick, let your playmakers go into space. That was not working. It was not being effective for you. You were not moving the ball when you're relying on your passing game. So what do? They start handing the ball off and you're picking it up in bunches, and you got it from multiple guys, especially Dejan Edwards. He had 86 rushing yards, I believe, on the day. And then Branson Robinson. Holy cow, what a debut. 98 yards, 12 carries. He also became the first running back since Sony Michel in 2014, I believe it was, to have, and for his first 10-plus carry performance, to have 95-plus or more yards. Freaking impressive, guys. I mean, that's going to be a guy that Georgia fans are going to be really happy to watch over the next few years. RBU continues to be RBU, nothing else about it. So they got a stable of running backs, and that's also nice to see. When Kendall Milton went down with an injury really early in the game, you had guys that could step up. You didn't miss a beat. You weren't you were getting your blocks downfield. And then how about get an applause for the offensive line for the way that they performed on Saturday as well. There were multiple times in the game where it looked like a run was about to be blown dead because it looked like it was standstill. And then the offensive line just comes in and piles on, and they push the pile for another 5 yards. That's good stuff right there. That's what you want to see from an offensive line that kind of struggled a week ago. So a lot of good things to build off of for Georgia heading into the Vanderbilt game. And then, like I said earlier in the show, going into the bye week especially, because you got a lot of big matchups going on there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And take a second real quick. Make sure you guys, if you're watching right now on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button on there. If you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe to the channel there.
All that stuff.
We have been doing really well on the subscriptions. They're going up over the past couple of weeks. We really appreciate the effort from you guys there. And then remember to share it with any friends or family or anything. Anybody that likes Georgia football, wants to hear a couple of guys just, fill the room with hot air for a little while. Yeah. We got you. We can give you about 45 minutes to an hour of time. Everything is also available, for people that can't watch on
your
YouTube.
Commute to work in the mornings, evenings, it's there for you. Just plug it in on your
First
car.
Thing in the morning, you can listen to it.
Audio,
we'll get you started in your day. But yeah, like you're saying, Georgia's got one more game, before the bye week, getting into the big part of your schedule at that point. And once you really get through this Vanderbilt game, you got a pretty tough stretch coming behind.
It's an ideal game to have right before your bye week, because it's not going to necessarily be the most physical game, so you probably don't have to worry too much about injuries, knock on wood. And it allows you to really heal up some players, because you're not trying to rush back Adonai Mitchell right now. You don't necessarily need him to come back. You saw him in some limited action against Auburn, but you could kind of tell, seeing him out on the field, he was not 100%. And then even Kirby Smart.
He was out there for only like one or two plays, so he really was only out there
Kirby Smart even said that he's not looking as good as he did this week as he did in warm-ups for the Auburn game. So I don't know that you'll see him this week.
Probably not.
Kendall Milton,
I don't think it's worth putting him out there even for
Kendall Milton,
anything.
He said, could probably go, but not really sure if they're going to play him. So again, like Jalen Carter's another guy. Like any other game, like one of your, like a Tennessee game right now, or even a Kentucky or Mississippi State, maybe you would potentially really want to get those guys rushing back into action, but you don't have to this week. You got Vanderbilt, and not a knock to Vanderbilt by any means, but let's be honest, they've been the bottom feeders of the SEC and the SEC East for quite a while.
On this real quick, Zach, we appreciate you watching and being active in the comments. It's fun. Vanderbilt last week almost scared Ole Miss for a little while. So you can't
scared
sleep.
Stoddard too.
You did, because I picked them last week, and they were, was sitting right there at that 17 points, which is what that spread was, I believe. And then they got the ball back and they were moving downfield. And just because Lane Kiffin decided he wanted to go ahead and put another touchdown on the board, just because he wanted a little bit more than the spread, I guess. I don't know.
Kids, if you're listening, don't bet money, because then you're going to end up sounding like Stoddard right now, saying where Vanderbilt was scaring him in a game where they ended up losing by, I think, like 24 points.
24.
So, yeah, there's a lesson of the day for you kids if you're listening. If we have a younger audience,
the other lesson of the day is keep up with us if you do bet. We're going to have some picks at the end of the episode.
Right now. By the time you hit that legal age, you're going to be killing it. You're not going to be losing anybody if you listen to us.
We got you. Don't worry about it. But no, Auburn was a game that I think the reason I put the title is Georgia back on track, because Georgia had a couple of bad games in a row, and then you see them come out there and they actually look dominant again. I understand that early in the game they were a little bit slower, and they did punt that 4 times in the first half, which is a lot. Had a missed field goal opportunity in the first half. So those 5 possessions were all wasted possessions. And that's not good for half a football game. That's a lot of nothing in the first half. But you still get those 2 touchdowns, go into the halftime, up by 14 points. Most people should be happy about being up over Auburn 14 points at halftime. I know you wanted to score more than that, but that also meant your defense was playing pretty darn good at the same time.
Yeah, I heard a stat, I believe it was on Monday, that said next year, Auburn, I think it was, like, relatively speaking, next year, Auburn will not have a single player that was born when Auburn beat Georgia at home last time.
Jeez.
That's how long it's been since.
It was 2005 was Auburn the last time they beat Georgia.
That's how long it's been since Auburn's beaten Georgia in Sanford Stadium. They didn't get it done on Saturday. So the streak continues. Georgia's win streak against Auburn continues. And
what's it, 6 in a row now?
It's 6 in a row. They still haven't recovered from that 2017 SEC championship game.
That's literally all it was. It was 2017. You go on the road to Jordan-Hare Stadium, and everything unravels for you. Everything goes so poorly.
Should have never said that infamous line of "we beat the dog crap out of them," didn't we? That infamous line.
Literally from then on,
unfolded all of this. Blame it on Gus Malzahn if you're an Auburn fan. You need to be pointing fingers at him. He's the one that brought this upon them. But, I mean, Kirby Smart's dominated most teams in the SEC in general, especially in the SEC East. But surprisingly, Vanderbilt was one of the teams that has actually beaten Kirby Smart in the SEC East. I believe the only team that has not is Missouri and Kentucky. Those are the only 2 teams that have never beaten Georgia since Kirby Smart has taken over the program. Vanderbilt ain't one of them, though. They got him in his first year, which, okay, take and give what it is. But since then,
2016 was that game. That was a rough one.
Since then, it's been pretty horrendous for the Commodores. Last year, they got whooped 62-0, which was kind of a sweet revenge after they canceled on you for your senior game in 2020, claiming that they could not field a healthy team. So then, that was kind of a sweet revenge for Georgia and remembering that. And so now you get them back in home. You finally get them. It's actually the first time Vanderbilt has played Georgia out in Sanford Stadium since 2018, surprisingly. Because of
2020, they didn't play.
Because of 2020, it's been that long. It's been 4 years almost since they came to
Sanford. They skipped their middle one that was supposed to happen. And because they didn't come play in 2020 on homecoming. Like you said, it's homecoming again this week, and it's time for Georgia to really just wail into them. That's what you want to see. I think this is what I wanted to say on it. Last week you saw Georgia run the ball so effectively against Auburn. I think you're going to see the opposite this week. You'll still see them run the ball hopefully pretty efficiently and effectively at the same time with Branson Robinson getting some more carries and stuff like that. If Kenny's not going to be playing, or not Kenny, but if Kendall doesn't play,
Branson's definitely going to get some looks. I put out an article this week about 3 players to watch for Georgia on offense. Branson Robinson was one of them. I also listed Adonai Mitchell because I was like, what you see from him on Saturday is probably a good indicator of what you might get of him out of the bye week, depending on how healthy he is. Even if you just see him in warmups, that might be a good indicator of like, okay, he's on the right track right now. Give him a whole week and then almost another full week right before Florida, and he might be good to go for the Gators as well. So, and then my last one was Stetson Bennett because he's got to get redialed in right now, and Vanderbilt very well could be a game where he could dial in the deep ball again, get some more consistency rolling because Georgia's probably going to have guys running wide open against Vanderbilt. They don't have
that leads perfectly into what I was going to say too. Was Georgia's going to have a pretty good passing day, I think, this week, even without Adonai Mitchell being ready, all that kind of stuff as well, because Vanderbilt allows about 480 yards of total offense per game. Georgia's averaging just over
515, I think.
Yeah, just over 500.
Or 517, that's what it is.
Yeah, that's what it is. And so they're averaging that much on there. They're throwing for 300-plus yards a game. Vanderbilt allows 325 yards passing per game. So that is their weak spot of their defense. They still allow 160 or something like that yards on the ground per game. Once again, they still 460 or 480 yards is a ton of offense per game to be giving up. But my point being, Stetson's going to be able to get out there and sling it because they don't have that many guys behind there that's going to be able to stop that game. Even if you have to, get some of that short game going with Brock, get him. That's what you want to see in Georgia's offense because that is their bread and butter. It works for them because they stretch these defenses out and they cannot keep up with the speed that some of these guys have, like Ladd and Brock. Once you get them in space like that, and I think you do see Stetson throw for 300 plus yards.
I think you've been seeing more of that recently because you don't have a guy that can kind of beat people vertically right now. Like
you really don't.
You can get and not in the instance that they don't have guys that can get past the secondary. Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers. You design up the right play, you're going to get guys up. And what I'm saying is, you don't have that true X receiver that Adonai Mitchell was playing for you. He was your guy that if you had a 50-50 ball that you want to throw to, it was going Five's way later in last season because That's who your best go-to wide receiver in those situations were. And you had a play last week where you had a free play. Adonai Mitchell was in on that play. Brooks Austin talked about this in his film review. Is typically that ball goes to 5, but instead he throws it to Kyrus Jackson, not necessarily a receiver that you would throw to in those instances where you're trying to just throw it up, let your guy go get it. So I think that was not only was that telling of how healthy Adonai Mitchell was, but also just telling you don't really have any options or any other options right now, or guys that haven't developed into that role or are comfortable in that role just yet. So getting Adonai Mitchell back will be crucial for Georgia, but I think passing game is going to be crucial for Georgia this weekend. Not necessarily in the aspect that you're going to have to throw for 350 yards or whatever, but just getting in that groove, building the back. We talked about after the Missouri game, build back up that confidence on both sides of the ball. You did that against Auburn. You didn't necessarily get to do it in the passing game necessarily because
you still had 500 yards of total offense, so you were very effective in your offensive game plan, which apparently they just looked at it and said, hey, we can run the ball. Yeah. We're going to keep running the ball.
And if that's working, do it.
Exactly. And that's what we have learned over the past several seasons now with Todd Monken is, if you're going to give it to me, I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was really happy to see this week. We talked about this last week before the game. I sat here and I was like, Georgia's rushing game hasn't shown me anything this whole season. And I want to see them be able to do it. It's not that I don't need them to do that every single game. If they can effectively pass the ball very well, that is perfectly fine with me. Whatever's going to work to get that 500 yards of total offense, I don't care how you do it. Just be effective. It's nice to see that they can switch gears and say, hey, that's what you're going to give me. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to run for 300 yards this week because you're going to let me do it.
Yeah, think back to the Arkansas game last year. Auburn was just emptying out the box pretty much and was like, go ahead, run it. And that's what they did for all 4 quarters. It was just pound and ground, and it led to a 31-0 victory. This time it led to another massive victory as well. So if that's what they're giving you, if that's what they're allowing you to do, then go ahead and take it, man. But then also the only thing you really are waiting to see now is if there's going to be a defense probably. Mississippi State did it to you a few years ago in 2020. They forced you to throw the ball. Like, they packed in the box. They're putting 7 or 8 dudes in the box, and you have them on your schedule again. And if they are forcing you to pass the game, can you win in those instances? That's what's going to be interesting, because now you've established your running game. People know that you're capable of it. Your offensive line is kind of building up some chemistry, and they're looking pretty solid after Saturday. So if a defense just come up on you and they're loading up the box and they're saying, all right, 13, let's see how much you've improved from last year, and let's see you beat us with your arm. Can you win in that instance? That's really the only thing left that we're waiting to see from Georgia's offense. Now, I know that he had a great game against Oregon and he threw the ball all over the place, but Oregon wasn't saying you have to throw to beat us. They weren't loading up the box. That was just Georgia out-schemed them. Georgia outplayed them in every aspect of that game this year. So it'll be interesting to see, 1, if a team decides to do that against Georgia, and 2, if Georgia will be able to win in that instance, if it ever does happen.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. And he did have several games throwing for 300 yards to start the season. The first 3 games in a row, he threw for over 300 yards. Fourth game, I think it was like 280 or something like that. It was close. It wasn't quite. That was the South Carolina game, and he threw for darn near 300 yards.
He was yakking up on the sidelines and on the field too.
Yes, he did. He threw up on the field, and he still threw for almost 300 yards in that game. It's hot in Columbia, South Carolina at September 17th. So
no kidding.
My point being is he has been able to throw for 300 plus yards in a game. It is different when the defense schemes it up that way.
Yeah, when that's all you got, when that's all you're relying on.
They kind of take your options away from
when
you.
That's what you have to do to open up the rest of your playbook, that's when it matters most. In
that case, you're going to need A.D. Mitchell back.
Yeah, and like I said,
you do need somebody like that
absolutely.
back for that game.
It'll be crucial to get him back. But like I said also, that's not me saying someone's going to do it to them, but I'm just saying if it ever does happen, that'll be another key point.
It's a test.
It's another key test. That's a good word to use. Another key test for Georgia's offense to see in that instance, can they win? Because if so, then they've proven everything. They've shown that they can. If they need to adapt to the run game, if the passing game is working, they've shown it. They did that against Auburn. Now if they can show that, then really, you got a complete offense in Athens, and probably one of the best you've seen in Athens in a really long time. Even better than last year's, even though they average like 38 points per game, which right now you're averaging like 39.4 points per game. So still looking really solid. And again, we said you're averaging 515 total yards of offense per game as well. So Georgia's offense is still doing really well. Really well.
It's the best offense that Georgia this season through the first 6 games. It's the best offense that you've seen at the University of Georgia with Todd Monken and with Kirby Smart.
Kirby Smart by far.
Yeah. And so there's nothing to complain about as far as like what they're able to do, you just hope that the biggest thing was, like I said last week, you cannot get into the red zone and then stall out and have to kick a bunch of field goals, because you start doing that against teams like Mississippi State, who's going to score some points on you. They're not going to be one of these teams out here like Auburn scoring 10 points. They're not going to do that. They're going to put some points up on you. So you're going to have to make sure that offense is not settling for field goals throughout most of the game against a team like that. Tennessee is also a team that has a pretty good offense that will probably score some points on you that you cannot do that with. So things like that, and they did seem to find some success this week, like I said, and so that was nice to see. But through the first 6 games, what have you seen? Like, is there a player that stood out to you so far? Because we're at that, like we said, we're about the halfway point here, and we're about to go into the bye week. Is there a single player on either side, you can, whatever you want to say, that's really kind of stood out to
I can name you 2 guys on defense right now that have really stood out. It's not going to be – the first one's not going to be surprising. Malachi Starks.
Yep.
Obviously. Almost had his 3rd interception
a
against
freshman.
Auburn. Just could not survive the ground and dropped it. But still, what a heck of an effort just to even have a chance of catching that ball. High point of the football, as he's shown us been able to do. He's just been a lurker back there in the secondary. He makes plays on he impacts the ball while it's still in the air, and that's something that you want in your safety. He's done it all for Georgia. He's been really impressive.
Georgia hasn't had like a true ball hawk safety in a while.
No, they haven't. Kind of like, I think Trey Battle's one that kind of comes to mind. He had a good amount of interceptions during his
Richard
time at
LeCount
Georgia.
kind of played he wasn't a
He was just
ball
a gambler,
hawk.
really.
He wasn't a ball hawk, but he definitely caused a lot of turnovers.
Yeah, he was just
in different ways. Like, he wasn't
wreak havoc as much as possible.
He was a havoc type player, but he still wasn't necessarily a ball hawk safety. Yeah.
But yeah, so Malachi Starks, and then one that really impressed me on Saturday, and I think it was nice seeing him be so impressive on Saturday because Jalen Carter wasn't playing. Bear Alexander, he had himself a ball game against Auburn. The defensive line in general against Auburn had a great game against the Tigers. They were getting pressure on Ashford consistently. He was running for his life. What'd you say? He was 13 for 38 or something like that?
13 for 38.
Game? Dude was chunking the ball to the sidelines like 60% of the time, it seemed like. He just had no time at all to throw the ball. And so I feel like we talked so much about the offense, we almost forgot to give the defense their props. They absolutely deserved it as well on Saturday.
It was a great game.
Yeah, so those 2 guys on defense for sure. On offense, gosh, it's kind of hard to pick one on offense right now because I feel like all the guys that have been doing the most are the guys that we already knew what they were capable of. Like Ladd McConkey had his coming out party last year. Brock Bowers had his coming out party last year. So I guess
I'm waiting to see if you say the name that I have in mind myself.
Oscar Delp has looked good in his limited action. I would say that the snaps that he's been out there, I think it's pretty telling that he's been out there in the 13 packages, which is 1 running back, 3 tight ends. If you don't know what that means, the 13 personnel. Kirby Smart talked about that this week as well, that he's been getting playing time in those instances. And I think that's pretty telling of what you have in Oscar Delp. So he's looked pretty solid. Dylan Bell in some instances.
Dylan Bell's been, yeah.
All right, I want to see what you have to say then.
My offensive player, and I'm trying to get the exact stat real quick too, is Darnell Washington has surprised me in the pass game some this season a little bit more. And not because I didn't think he was capable of it. It's just because we haven't seen it used as much because he's had different injuries and all the stuff. And then you had Brock Bowers going off last year. You had all of those weapons around him that he hasn't had the opportunity to do it. His ability to catch the ball and make plays with his hands is something that he's really starting to flash this season because everyone knows how well of an inline blocker he has been and how important he has been to Georgia in that aspect of the game. It's really been kind of fun to see him make those pretty incredible catches, not even like easy catches right in the chest. Like he's twisting, turning, making these plays, hurdling defenders, like all of this kind of stuff.
He's got to calm down a little bit there.
He needs. This last one was a little bit.
He's spamming that Y button, man. He is spamming the hurdle button. He
definitely did try that last week.
It seems like every time he gets the ball down the sidelines, he's going to try and jump over the dude. May have gotten a little too much confidence after that Oregon game. But okay, I'll give you a different one. Marcus Rosemi-Jacksaint. He's been impressive.
It's nice to see him get back in the mix of it.
Yeah, because we had that short glimpse of him in 2020, and then he broke his ankle in the Florida game after he caught the touchdown. And then it's kind of been a slow rehab back for him getting back in the mix.
Wasn't that like his first catch of the season that year too?
It was his first touchdown.
It was definitely his first touchdown. It might have been his first catch.
But
I don't know. Yeah.
And then he had
St. Jack.
He kind of caught the short end of the – oh, yeah. If you watched the game this past weekend, the commentator just could not for the life of him
St. Jack.
get his name right. Every single time it was St. Jack. But and he kind of fell victim to Adonai Mitchell and Lamb McConkey getting some time over him because they were able to steal some minutes away, and then they became impact players, and you're not going to take them out of the line. And now this year he got his shot when Adonai Mitchell went down, and he's made the most of it. Like against Missouri, he made some good plays. He's a great blocker to have as a wide receiver.
He has done that better than probably any other guy.
I know he missed one against Auburn, but you could see the look on his face like, man, I don't mess those up. But unfortunately, he
takes pride.
Play.
I think he takes pride in his ability to block. And I think it's important.
And he actually made a few catches, I believe, as well against Auburn. So that'll be my offensive pick to go with for that one.
Yeah, I like that too. You kind of covered a couple of the really obvious or good ones on the defensive side. But just to add one to that as well, Kamari Lassiter's looked pretty good. I understand that he had a blown coverage, or I think maybe 2 this season. But overall, he's looked really, really good. He's in the right places the majority of the times. He really comes down and hits people. He's a very physical corner from what I've seen so far.
A lot of good things to say about him this week as well.
He's been a very physical corner, and that's been kind of nice to see as well. I think Georgia's been kind of missing a little bit of that. Ringo is definitely a great cornerback as well, but I feel like he could be a very physical guy. He's just not really played that way too much through the first part of his career. But Kamari Lassiter so far through the first 6 games has been a very physical cornerback, and I think that's an important piece to have on your defense as well.
Yeah, and Peter Young is talking about how they like to pick on Lassiter. That's what teams are going to do when you got a young, inexperienced cornerback. He's just a sophomore.
And they picked on Keeley a lot.
Yeah, if you remember last year, a lot of teams were throwing after Kilo very early on in the season, and he was losing a
Clemson was putting him on
every single chance they got one-on-one. They were throwing it that way. And South Carolina did it as well a good number of times when they played them. And he got beat early on in the year. And then what happened later in the season? People started saying, okay, this guy might be a valid top 10 pick when it's his turn to go in the draft. Now, he may have regressed a little bit early on this year, but I think with cornerback especially, the more the season goes on, the better those guys are going to get. I think regardless of how long you've played, once you get deeper into that schedule, I feel like those guys really lock in, and especially when you have 2 guys like Kamari Lassiter and Keely Ringo, they're definitely going to get better as the season goes on. So I think those 2 guys are really going to come up huge for Georgia in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I definitely think so as well, and it's going to be nice to see. So we covered the first part and players to look for there. We obviously talked a bunch about the games that we've already seen. I already kind of know one game that you're looking at, for the next part of the season. But go ahead and just jump into a game to watch.
Man,
sorry, guys.
So we sat here in the off season and we said, look at Georgia's schedule. Not a single game on here that they need to be circling on the schedule. Georgia's going to take care of
our SEC preview.
Probably
did
pretty
not
easily.
Stand very strong this year.
That's usually how
it was great last year.
That's usually how.
No, we were really good last year.
We were okay. We did pretty solid. This year, not so much. But that's typically how preseason predictions go, and that's why you should never listen to them because they typically do not pan out.
Don't say that. Listen to our preseason predictions.
Well, yeah, listen, but take them with a grain of salt. That's what I'm saying. But now you look at Georgia's second half of the schedule. Florida, okay, yeah. Florida's probably is what we expected them to be at this point.
Yeah, they're right around where you thought they would be.
All of a sudden, Tennessee creeping in on the top 5 now in college football. Their offense is looking pretty good. They have a big game against Alabama this week. That'll be a huge telling point of how legit they actually are at this point.
We'll come back to that because I want to talk about that for a minute too.
And then Mississippi State. This is the one that I was telling Stoddard before the show. I think this is the game that really Georgia fans should be zoning in on right now because you play in Starksville.
Yep.
And there's a good chance potentially that game might be a noon game. That game might be a noon game. I don't know the rest of the SEC schedule that week, and that'll depend on whether or not you maybe get the 3:30 slot, depending on where Mississippi State is ranked and what other teams are.
I guess it depends on who they play leading up to that game, too, if they lose another game or not. I don't know what their schedule is in the next couple of weeks.
Will Rogers is on one this season. He is playing out of his mind. They chunked the ball all over the place. It's really going to test your secondary. And it's just that environment, as corny as it is, as stupid as it is, cowbells are annoying as heck. So I just think everything about that game right now at this point is just kind of like, that one. You might want to stay away from that one. You don't want to overlook that one. That's a game you certainly don't want to go into and just expect to go in. Now, but also I will say this, games like that end up being something that end up being a bigger game than what you thought. Georgia typically handles business with, and they do it rather dominantly as well. Think back again to last year in Arkansas.
Yep.
Nobody thought that game was going to be a good word or a good game. And now
you read the comment.
I did.
Good job, Dean.
I know. I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. Multitasking, not my strongest skill, obviously. But yeah, it's just don't want to overlook Mississippi State. That's the game I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that's going to be a good one. And we came out and we really gave them a really hard time in preseason.
We had them finishing last in the West, guys, and they're in the top 25 now.
4 games. We had them winning 4 games, and now they've already got 4 wins already.
Yeah,
this far.
I assume you want to talk about the Tennessee game.
I'd say the Tennessee game is because I knew you were going to say Mississippi State because we've talked about that earlier in the week. We were texting about it and everything. So that was what I was going to bring. Is the Tennessee game is one to watch, obviously. Like you said, they're creeping up into it. They are a top 10 team. They're creeping up in that top 5 area. They keep winning. Now, if they happen to beat Alabama this week, then obviously they will be in a top 5 spot at that point. Like they would jump pretty high at that point.
Dan, I want to point something out to you. If you go back and listen to our offseason predictions, I believe I said I think Mississippi State could be a trap game for Georgia this year. And I said, because that environment gets loud and it's stupid and people go bonkers.
Even though we gave them such a hard time.
Yeah. So I've been telling you. You don't come in here and tell me on my own show that you were trying to tell us. I've been telling you, fam. Now I'm telling you right now at the halfway point. Yeah, don't be looking over those other Bulldogs on the west side of the SEC. So
exactly. But Tennessee is a game that I think you expected it to be a good game. We said this preseason that was your best home game by far.
Oh, easily.
It was definitely going to be your best home because the other home game that you had on your schedule that was going to be a good one is Auburn, and we just saw how that went anyways. We kind of expected it to go that way. So Tennessee was one that you expected to come in. Like I said earlier, they're going to score some points. So you got to make sure that you're not settling for field goals and you're not slowing down your offense in that aspect or starting to stall in the red zone like you did a couple times this season. You cannot do that against Tennessee. So that's obviously a game to watch out for in the back half of the season. This weekend is really going to tell you, though, what kind of team Tennessee is.
Yeah.
The big deciding factor for me of how I think that game's going to go is if Bryce Young plays.
If Bryce Young plays, I'll take Bama all day.
If Bryce Young, I looked at, because, for our Classic City Pick'ems, I looked at that spread. I think the spread's 7.5 right now.
Tennessee's passing defense ranks 128th out of 131. That is horrible. If Bryce Young plays on Saturday, it's wraps. I'll go ahead and tell you right now.
Well, that's what I was going to say is if I knew right now that he would be playing, I would have picked them to cover that spread. That would have been my pick this week. I probably would too. But I'm not picking that if you have Milroe play, and because he has not been able to air out the ball that much. He runs the ball he is doing that thing that every young quarterback does when they get thrown in like that, especially Bama quarterbacks, because except the Tuas of the world, because that was a rare one where he came out just airing the ball out as soon as he came out. But he comes in, he's got that one read kind of look right now where he looks and then he just takes off.
Brother.
We talked about this the other day. He's leading the team in carries, like in a game. Like, I think he had 15 carries. Like, that's not going to work.
No.
Like, that's a bad way to play quarterback in the SEC because you're going to get hit too many times to be doing that. Mm-hmm. And so if he's the starting quarterback, Tennessee, it could be a pretty good game this weekend.
I also feel like this would just be, and we can end it on this, is that this is building up to be such a typical Tennessee letdown game. Like, finally back in the top 10. We've got a Heisman candidate on our team, or what looks to be like a Heisman candidate right now. We look like world beaters with our offense. And it'd only be fitting, being Tennessee, that Alabama would come into their territory and just absolutely stomp them and just beat the brakes off of them, air out Neyland Stadium, just take the energy out, and just put on an absolute beatdown in front of the Knoxville fans up there. So, not saying that'll happen, but it just kind of feels like that. That would be such a typical Tennessee thing to happen for Alabama to come in there and do them like that. But you talked about pick'ems, so that's what we're going to dive into right now. Starter brought it back again. It's tied up. It's all tied up. What'd you say the record was now?
7-6.
7-6. It is all notched up between us two. He went 2-0 last week. I went 1-1. And so now we're back. We're all back to square one, it seems like. After I took the early lead in the season,
I'm telling you, man.
Stoddard fought back and clawed his way back into this
one.
I
was way down.
It was not looking too good for Stoddard. I was down by like
3 picks at one point in time, I think. No,
it was not. So now we got a fresh new slate of picks, and we're going to let you go ahead and start with this. Stoddard.
All right, so my first one is it's Texas over Iowa State minus 16.5, and that's kind of high. As Last week I went with Ole Miss 17 over minus 17 over Vanderbilt, which I really don't like picking games like that because it just feels like a lot of points. So I went with another one that's kind of a little bit out of my comfort zone on it, but Iowa State is not scoring a lot of points, man. They score 23 points a game, and their defense is good for who they've played. It's 13 points a game on that side of it. But Texas is out here throwing or having about 100 yards more of total offense per game than them, scoring 38 points a game. And we just saw what they did last week. That was my deciding factor on why I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and go with it. Quinn Ewers aired it out last week.
He looked good.
And he looked good. He's healthy and he's ready to go. And they put 49 up against Oklahoma last week, which really kind of shoved them in a locker.
To be horrible.
Yeah.
We'll get into that here in a second. My first pick, Ole Miss minus 14.5 versus Auburn. Ole Miss loves to run the ball. Auburn struggled to stop the run game against Georgia. They got Zach Evans back there in the backfield. They also got Jackson Dart, who can run a little bit as well. I like Lane Kiffin's offense in this one. I believe it is also at Ole Miss for this one as well. So I like the Rebels against Auburn. Auburn is just really struggling right now. It doesn't seem like they're going to be retaining their head coach, Brian Harsin, very much longer. It's just a dumpster fire down there in Auburn. So I'm taking the Rebels minus 14.5 versus Auburn.
My second one is going to be, since we talked about them so much today, kind of had them on my mind, Mississippi State minus 4 over Kentucky. Kentucky was a team that we were extremely high on early in the season. We expected them to be the number 2 team in the SEC East. They've now dropped 2 games. They lost a nail-biter to Ole Miss, 2 weeks ago, and then losing to South Carolina. I understand. That's what I was going to say. They didn't have Will Levis.
So I think this game really depends on, is Will Levis going to be playing?
Yes, that was going to be my thing too. But even if Will Levis plays, I like the 4-point spread for Mississippi State on that because, once again, Mississippi State is scoring points. They are throwing the ball everywhere, and they are going to be – they're still going to have their offense, And I don't think Kentucky, even with Will Levis, is going to stay within 4 points of Mississippi State this week. I've been kind of disappointed in Kentucky the last couple of weeks. And once again, I understand Will Levis not being there last week does make a huge difference, but it was South Carolina. It was South Carolina.
True. All right, I'm going to provide before my next pick, I'm going to provide some context here. Dan's throwing smoke my way because I threw smoke at him, saying that says the guy going to a wedding during football season. Let me clarify. It's on Sunday. So, Rudes, it is on Sunday. I will not be missing any college football on Saturday for a wedding. It's at 4 p.m. on a Sunday. So, I'll take that over any Saturday weddings. We've touched on that on this platform multiple times, is that we do not do Saturday weddings, even though you've been to like 50 of them already.
Well, I was about to say I'm going to one on Saturday, so
guys, I need a new co-host. This is blasphemous.
This one's not my fault. It's my wife's fault.
It's never your fault. I mean, goodness gracious.
This one's my wife's friend, and then I have to go. And I tried. I thought the wedding was next week. And it's not next week.
Yeah, shame on your friend for not doing it next week.
I thought it was next week, and for the longest time,
I've been planning for it to be the bye week is right there.
I know, and it's her friend, not mine, but they are UGA grads, which is bad, right? That's pretty bad. Yep. But I'm going to be at a wedding at 4:00 on Saturday.
Are y'all hearing this?
Yes.
I can't even believe the nonsense you just spewed out of your mouth. The Georgia grads, the bye week's right there, and you put it on the homecoming game against Vanderbilt. What are we doing here, folks? Anyways,
Dean, if that happens, I see your comment. If that happens, I'm not going to that wedding. Sorry, buddy.
Wow. So you'll go to all these other weddings, but not mine. I see how it is.
No, because you say stuff like you just said a second ago about how bad it is. I'm just saying.
It ain't happening. I can go ahead and guarantee you that. Anyways. Kansas
Dean, you'll learn about that one
Kansas
day.
plus 9 versus Oklahoma. All right, I told you we were going to dip into Oklahoma. Oklahoma, another dumpster fire. Goodness gracious. Brent Venables struggling in his first year up there with the Sooners, especially after getting to a pretty decent start, after being ranked in the top 10, top 5, I believe, actually, to start the season. And now they're 3-3 right now. Whew, horrible. Yep. And I know Kansas lost their starting quarterback, but man, Mike Bean, I think is his name, the new backup, the backup for Kansas. He lit it up last week against TCU. He threw for like 285 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I like what they have on their backup quarterback, and I especially like them against Oklahoma's team right now. Oklahoma's not looking too hot. So again, Taking the Jayhawks +9 versus Oklahoma and that horrendous football program that they got going on up there. So that's going to conclude the pick'ems. We're going to recap them real quick. Ole Miss, for me, -14.5 versus Auburn, and then Kansas +9 versus Oklahoma.
And a Mississippi State -4 against Kentucky. And then I had, I'm blanking now, Jesus. My brain just froze.
Texas,
Iowa State. 16.5, Iowa State.
There you go. Those are the 4 picks locked in. No more backing out. No backsies when it comes to the Classic City pick'ems. You're locked in for good as of Wednesday night when you put them out on the platform. Now we get to get into King of the Hill, and I'm really excited for this one. I'm
kind of letting him run this one. I'm going to kind of let him stand on the top of this King of the Hill. He can have it. It's a good one.
You know, at this point in the college football season, we start to really learn what teams are at this point. You have a pretty good idea of who teams are. And so now what does that lead to? That leads to people putting out these takes about who is the best team in college football, who is going to be the playoffs team, who are going to be the 4 playoff teams when it's all said and done, and who is a team that everybody needs to knock off the number 1 spot. Georgia reclaimed their number 1 ranking this week, actually, after beating Auburn.
It did surprise
Alabama
me,
struggle with
honestly.
Texas A&M. But now people are coming out here saying that Ohio State needs to be the number 1 team and that they are the best team in college football, because look at what they've done so far. Look at what CJ Stroud is doing. I know he has like 24 touchdowns already on the season. He's been playing pretty solid. But let me learn y'all something real quick. That's a bunch of hooey. This whole nonsense about Oklahoma State is the number 1 team in the country. Let me tell you why. Here is Ohio State's opponent record so far this season, 17-18. Let me read them off for you. Notre Dame, okay, that was a top 5 game at the moment. Not anymore. Notre Dame is not even in the top 25 anymore.
Where's Notre Dame at now?
So that one doesn't even count for you anymore. Toledo, Arkansas State, Wisconsin, who just fired their head coach as well, Rutgers, and Michigan State, who is at the bottom of their division right now. Michigan State is for the Big Ten. So not too many good teams there, Stoddard. Not anybody that you would say, wow, that's a solid victory for Ohio State. Now let's compare them to Georgia, or actually, let me say this first. Best offense that they have faced this year is Toledo, who has the 29th best offense in the FBS right now, who is averaging 36.2 games. I think that says something if Toledo is the best offense that you played, considering that you do have some Big Ten teams and they're on your schedule already. So like I said, now let's compare them to Georgia right now. Let's see how they're doing compared to Georgia. Georgia's opponents' records, 21-15. So 21-15 for Georgia, 17-18 for Ohio State. They played Oregon, who's a top 10 team right now, and they mollywopped in the first game of the season. So that's a legitimate win for Georgia, the fact that you beat a top 10 team that early in the season and that they are a top 10 team now still. You got Samford, Kent State, okay, South Carolina, Missouri, and Auburn. The best offense you've played, Oregon. 9th best offense, 42 points per game. So you face a top 10 offense. You've been tested. Your defense has been tested. And it's a top 10 offense that you win against. A team that is rolling right now and a team that looks like potentially a team that could win the Pac-12. Tell me where Ohio State has earned this number 1 ranking that everybody keeps talking about. Tell me where Ohio State has earned to be able to be claiming themselves as the best team in college football. This happens every single year. They cruise through their cush Big Ten schedule. All these teams that are pretty much irrelevant in college football right now. Nobody's talking about Rutgers, Michigan State, or Wisconsin. They're talking about Wisconsin because, again, they fired their head coach. But that's about it. Why are we ranking? Why are we talking about Ohio State like this when that happens every single year, it seems like? It makes no sense to me, and that's the hill I am dying on today, is that Ohio State does not deserve to be put in that classification right now. They have done nothing to show for it. They have not earned it.
No, and to add to it, like the reason, there's 2 reasons that they say it, and I want to get into it as well. The first thing being that everyone acts like they haven't had a challenge game, or they haven't had a game that they've underperformed like Georgia has and like Alabama has at this point in time in the season. That's what they're clinging to, saying that they should be the number 1 team in the country. Well, once again, Notre Dame was a crappy game for them. I understand they were ranked so high at the time, but just because they were ranked so high at the time, like you said, they are no longer a top 25 team.
Notre Dame went on to
that
lose
doesn't
to
matter
Marshall
anymore. Yes, they lost the next week to Marshall. I think it was the next week, was it not?
Yeah, it was the very next week.
So they did struggle. They had that struggle game.
And I get it. You put up 77 points against either Toledo or whoever else. I can't remember which cupcake team you played where you put up 77 points. Okay. Congratulations. Like, what do you? I understand. C.J. Stroud is a good quarterback. He is going to be a high round draft pick. He has earned that right. That offense is probably pretty. It is good. They do have a good offense, but collectively, I'm talking about track record and what you have shown us. Just because you beat up on a bunch of teams that aren't very good, that tells me you ain't earned nothing. You ain't earned my respect yet. You have given me no reason to say good for you. Clap it up. You're a good football team. You're legit. It gives me no reason to give you those type of accolades right now. Absolutely no reason. And although Georgia has struggled with Missouri, at least they have a top 10 win right now, a team that is still ranked in the top 10. And like I said, Oregon has the ninth best offense in the nation right now.
So, and Oregon, like you said, has a chance to win the Pac-12 still. The
Yeah.
Pac-12, like we talked about, like the Pac-12 early on in the season, and everyone was talking about how the Pac-12 was basically out of the playoffs after the first 2 weeks because Utah, or after the first week because Utah got killed. Or didn't get killed. They lost to Florida, and then Georgia killed Oregon. Well, Oregon has now bounced back so much from it that they're actually dominating still at this point. And before the season started, we talked about it, and I said that I thought they could have a 10-win season this year.
Absolutely.
And now it's looking like that's very possible. They still have some tough games on their schedule, so we'll see how it plays out in the Pac-12. But that's a team that's actually still good in college football right now. The other big reason is kind of what you just hit on, talking about them scoring 77 points and everything like that. I just saw this earlier today, and you told me what you were going to talk about. So I was like, oh, that's perfect. Ohio State is 0-6. Buckeyes have outscored their opponents by a combined score of 293 to 94, and that's an average score of 49-16 each game. And that's why they think that they are the dominant team out there. But like you said, part of that offense, the points that they got is from scoring 77 against Toledo or whoever it was. But our guy, Jay Griff, just did some stuff on this and put this out on top of that other tweet.
Shouts
and he said,
out to Jay Griff.
Yeah, shouts to Jay Griff. 6-0 for Georgia, outscored their opponent by a combined score of 234 to 64, and that's an average score of 39 to 11 each game, while struggling in 2 games this year. If Ohio State is the number 1 team like they claim, the numbers shouldn't be as close against the struggling UGA team.
And look, they don't play anybody, bro. Look, this is who they got coming up. Iowa. They're going to lose by 60. Iowa's going to lose by 60 in that game. But their offense is horrible. One of the worst in college football. You got Penn State, who's ranked as a top 10 opponent. So maybe that one. We'll see. Maybe that one's your first test of the season. We'll see how Penn State fares out until for another week. Then you got Northwestern. Again, they're 1-5 right now, so that ain't going to be a game. You got Indiana, they're 3-3. Okay, Maryland 4-2. They got a pretty solid passing game right now with Talia Tagovailoa. Try saying that 10 times fast, by the way. And then, of course, you end it with Michigan, and you better hope that. And Michigan's in the same situation. They ain't played nobody either, man. So really, Ohio State doesn't get tested until the last week of the season.
They do that every year,
and that's what I'm saying.
That's the point. They do that every single year.
They fool y'all every single year. And now they're doing it to you yet again. Now, if they do end up going undefeated the rest of the way and they go out and they impress in the college football playoff, okay. I'll stand in the paint on that one. I'll take my shots. I'll take the heat all day long. But as of right now, they have done nothing to earn my respect. They've done nothing to earn earn the claim of being the best team in college football. Case closed in point for me. That's going to do it on the King of the Hill for me. Unless you got anything else you want to add?
Just because I feel like I've been on this so much this season, and I'm not going to get on a King of the Hill part of it, but a team that has a chance, and I'm not saying they're overrated right now. I'm saying they have to prove themselves this week.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
USC, we talked about them a bunch on this show at this point because of me.
You've talked about
I understand.
Them a bunch.
Well, you've joined in conversation because of me.
Went to bat for my boy Lincoln.
You did. But my point on it is through the season so far, they haven't had a challenge game yet for them compared to, considering they are a decent team. I've upped what I think that they will have wins-wise this year. I think they are still capable of having a 10-win season, regular season. If the bowl game, they could win that too, whatever. But the Pac-12 is actually more competitive than we thought at the beginning of the year. It's kind of what I hinted at earlier. You have UCLA that is still undefeated, who actually had a pretty big win last week, and I picked against them, and that was the problem. And now they dominated. Yeah. So they have to play. I think they actually play against USC still, and USC still plays Utah this week, and do that. I think USC plays Oregon this year.
I'm not sure.
I can't remember or not. But my point being, they have a pretty tough stretch coming up as far as their schedule goes as well to see what they can do. This game, Utah is a 2-loss team because they lost last week. Utah's still favored in that game by 4 points, I think.
Yeah, so again, I don't pay much attention to the
We'll
Pac-12, so I don't know. But football's going to take care of football. We've said that on this show before. It's going to happen. We've also said that on 4 Wide a good bit, which you should tune into on Sundays over on the Film Guy Network, where me, Jeremiah, and Dan Kiley give you the facts of the NFL Sunday night afternoon slate. Dean's won an extra King of the Hill, final of the NLDS series. Let me give you a little doctor's antidote on this one, all right? I'll give you my answer. 3-1. Braves taking it. First one was a fluke, all right? They lost the first game of the series last year in the NLDS. They went on to win the World Series. They're going to get the dub tonight. They're going to get the dub, and then they're going to get 2 more in Philadelphia. It's going to be 3-1. Series wrapped up, going back into the NLCS. What you got, Stoddard?
I think I like that too. This game right now, Dean gave us the score update, which we appreciate because we were watching that pre-show. 0-0 bottom of the 5th. This is a game at home. You gotta bounce back.
Take this one.
The fans have been sitting out in the sun in the rain and at the stadium for 4 hours before the game actually started, getting a little tipsy and getting ready to go. So I'm sure the atmosphere is really good right now in a playoff game that is playing out like that as well. A 0-0 game in the 5th inning. That's what you want. That's a fun game to watch in the playoffs. I know a lot of people like the offensive side. I kind of like those pitching duels in the playoffs.
Braves have been too hot this season. They're not going to – I don't see them staying quiet for this long in a series for them to lose a series. But, yeah, I still got 3-1.
You need guys like Dansby to step up and make some plays in the playoff series. He's been so good for you throughout the entire season. This is not the time to get cold. So hopefully he can bounce back after having a pretty rough day yesterday.
They're going to be all right. But, yeah, that is going to do it for this week's Classic City podcast episode. I believe episode number 74, guys, of this podcast. Creeping in on triple digits for us. That's pretty impressive if you ask me. Like, subscribe. You see it on the banner right there. Like the video if you haven't already. If you're watching us right now, subscribe as well if you have not subscribed already. And just missed a home run. So, Dean interrupting the outro real quick, but that's okay. Braves baseball is what is most important right now, and that's okay. Follow us on all the socials, Classic City Pod, the Stodfather, Dr._J-Ball. If you're a regular listener, you should know this by now. You know all the details right now. You know how to take care of us so we can take care of you furthermore on this episode. And Stoddard, do I get to close out? Or
Go for it. Yeah, this is
I get to close out. I got to open and I get to close and I got to do the plugs. It was all handed to me today. Wow. I finally earned my respect on the show, I guess. So, but that is going to do it for guys. Keep it classy in the Classic City, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Classic City Sports. Take a second to subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends and family. Feel free to reach out to the Classic City Sports crew on Twitter with any topics you'd like discussed. You can reach out to Jeremiah at the Stodfather, to Jonathan at Dr._J-Will, and make sure to follow at Classic City Pod for show updates. Check back next week for a brand new episode. In the meantime,
2 simple words which express the sentiments of the entire Bulldog Nation.